It started on a rainy Thursday, the kind where the clouds hang low like they're pressing down on your skull and the wind has a way of reaching into your bones. I was coming home from work, soaked through despite my umbrella, and when I opened the door to our shared apartment, the silence was deafening. No clatter of paws on the hardwood, no excited bark, no warm body weaving between my legs like she always did when I walked through the door. No Bella. At first, I thought maybe she was asleep, or maybe my sister Lila had taken her out for a walk. But then I noticed the leash hanging on the hook by the door. Her favorite squeaky toy was gone. So was the bowl I kept in the kitchen corner, the one with her name in peeling blue letters. My heart dropped before my brain caught up. Something was off. Something was terribly, violently off. I walked through the apartment like I was looking, through fog, checking every corner, every closet, every place she might have hidden or curled up in. I even called her name, half expecting her head to pop out from behind the couch or under my bed. Nothing. Just the cold, sickening echo of my own voice bouncing off the walls. Lila wasn't home. That didn't surprise me. She was always gone at weird hours, flitting from one crisis to another, living in a way that was fast and loose and completely detached from consequence. But I called her anyway. The phone rang 5 times before she picked up. "Hey," she said, casual as ever. I could hear laughter in the background, music, the unmistakable clink of glasses. "What's up?" I didn't even try to keep the steel out of my voice. "Where is Bella?" There was a pause, a short one. Then she exhaled, and I swear to God I could hear the guilt slide into her throat like acid. Look, don't freak out, okay? I found her a new home." I froze. My body went still in that horrible, sharp way, like when a car slams on the brakes and you feel your whole skeleton try to keep moving. "You what?" "She's with this super sweet family in the suburbs," Lila said, rushing now, like if she talked fast enough, I wouldn't hear how deep she had betrayed me. "They've got kids and a big yard, and she seemed really happy." "You gave my dog away?" I whispered, because that was all I could manage. My knees hit the couch and I sank down, suddenly hollow. "Without even telling me?" "You weren't around," she snapped, instantly defensive, like she had to armor up. "You've been working late every day, and Bella was always alone, and it was so sad. I did what I thought was best." "For who?" My voice cracked. I hadn't cried yet, but the sting was behind my eyes, building like a dam. "For her? For me? Or just for you, because you couldn't stand to be inconvenienced by someone else's responsibility for 5 damn minutes?" There was a long silence. "You had no right," I said, and I meant every word with the kind of clarity that only comes when you've been cracked open by someone you trusted. She was mine. I raised her. I adopted her. I trained her. She's not a pair of shoes you lend to someone else when I'm not looking. "I'm sorry," Lila said finally, but it was the kind of sorry people say when they just want the conversation to be over. "It's done now." That was when something in me turned. Not broke, not shattered. Just turned, like a key in a lock, something precise and final. If she thought it was done, then she didn't understand what she had taken from me. Not just a dog, not just a companion. Bella was the one constant in a life that had been pulled apart at the seams more times than I could count. She was the warmth in my loneliest moments, the thread that stitched me to something whole and kind. Lila had always been careless, always skating by on charm and luck and the assumption that the world would forgive her. But this wasn't just careless. This was calculated indifference. This was theft. And that night, while I sat on the floor of my room surrounded by the empty silence Bella used to fill, I knew I couldn't just let it go. She loved her dog too. A ridiculous, tiny Pomeranian named Miso, who wore sweaters and had a custom Instagram account and got fed grilled chicken breast because kibble was too boring. Lila doted on that dog like it was her baby. She took selfies with it, brought it to cafes in her purse, even cooed to it in that grating baby voice I used to mock. So I waited. I waited for 2 weeks, saying nothing. I let the anger steep like dark tea, turning bitter and strong. I played nice. I made small talk. I asked how Miso was doing, smiled when she posted photos of her wrapped in a pink blanket. Lila had no idea what was coming, and when the time was right, I made sure she came. Home to an empty apartment, too. I chose a Saturday afternoon, the kind that stretched out lazy and soft, when Lila would be gone for hours at brunch with her friends, posting pictures of avocado toast and mimosas with her fake laughing face tilted toward the sun. She left Miso behind, as always, assuming the universe would bend to her schedule and her needs. I made sure Miso was comfortable first, because no matter how angry I was at Lila, I wasn't cruel. I packed her little leash, her favorite blanket, the squeaky toy shaped like a pineapple she always carried around, and a small bag of her special food. I bundled her up gently, whispered to her in a soft voice, and kissed the top of her tiny head. She wagged her tail and looked up at me with pure, unfiltered trust, the kind that animals give so freely and humans so rarely deserve. It made my heart clench, but I shook the guilt off like water. Lila didn't think twice about handing off Bella to strangers. She didn't even ask. I owed her no better. I already had a plan. I'd spent those 2 weeks contacting local rescues, explaining Miso's situation under a fake name. I didn't have the heart to put her on the street or dump her in a shelter where she might end up caged and scared. No. Miso would go to a good home, someone who would adore her, treat her the way she deserved. The rescue organization had been all too happy to help. They didn't ask too many questions once they saw her. A healthy, well-groomed little dog, easily adoptable. I drove her there myself, the carrier sitting in the passenger seat, Miso occasionally letting out a soft whine. Every time she made a sound, my chest tightened. I kept my eyes on the road and told myself it was justice. It had to be. The handoff was quiet, businesslike. I signed a few papers, handed over the carrier, and watched through the windshield as the volunteer cooed at Miso, lifting her out gently and nuzzling her cheek against the tiny dog's fur. It would be okay. She would be loved. The drive home was a blur of adrenaline and sick satisfaction. I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. How easy it had been. How quickly I had undone what Lila thought she could hold on to without consequence. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of peace slide through my veins. When Lila got home that evening, it was almost too perfect. I was sitting on the couch with a book, pretending to be relaxed, my heart hammering in my chest like a trapped bird. She walked in, dumping her purse on the entryway table, and kicked off her shoes. "Miso," she called out, her voice lilting up the hallway. I kept my face buried in the pages. "Miso, come here, baby," she called again, a little sharper now. The apartment stayed silent. I heard her footsteps pick up speed, her voice rising. "Where is she? Miso, where the hell are you?" I turned the page of my book slowly, savoring the moment the way a starving person savors a single bite of bread. Finally, she turned the corner and saw me. "Where's Miso?" she demanded, her voice cracking with the first seeds of panic. I looked up at her, letting my face stay perfectly blank. "Gone." She blinked, not understanding. "What do you mean, gone?" I closed the book with a soft thud. "I found her a new home, a nice family, kids, big yard. She seemed really happy." The words hit her like a slap. I could see it. The way her mouth opened and closed, the color draining from her face, the way her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You're lying," she whispered. I stood up, slow and deliberate, and crossed the room until I was standing, inches away from her. I could smell the sweet perfume she wore, the faint bitterness of the mimosa still lingering on her breath. "No, I'm not," I said softly. "You gave away my dog without asking. I'm just returning the favor. The silence between us stretched and stretched, taut and trembling like a wire about to snap. You're a monster, she spat finally, her voice shaking. A bitter smile curved my lips. Takes one to know one. Lila shoved past me, frantically, searching the apartment, tearing open closets, looking under furniture as if somehow miso would magically appear if she just looked hard enough. Watching her crumble, watching her face crumple in real time, it should have made me feel victorious. But all I felt was hollow. The kind of hollow that echoed. The kind of hollow that no amount of revenge could ever fill. Lila collapsed onto the floor in the living room, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, rocking herself back and forth like a child. Tears streamed down her face, the kind of messy, uncontrollable crying that strips you raw. I stood there, for a long moment, watching her, feeling the anger still burning inside me. But it was cooling now, settling into something heavier and sadder. How could you do this? She gasped between sobs, her voice hoarse. She was my baby. A flash of fury surged through me again, quick and hot. And what was Bella to me, Lila? An accessory? A burden you could just hand off because it didn't fit your life? She didn't answer. She just cried harder, pressing her face into her knees, her shoulders shaking. The sound of it filled the room, bouncing off the walls, making it impossible to ignore. It should have satisfied me. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, all I felt was exhausted. I sat down in the armchair across from her, my body heavy, my heart heavier. The rain had started again outside, tapping against the windows, like tiny fingers, a steady, relentless rhythm. It matched the ache inside my chest. I didn't do it to hurt you, she said finally, lifting her head to look at me, her eyes red and swollen. I really thought I was doing the right thing. You didn't ask, I said quietly. You didn't trust me enough to even have a conversation. You just decided. Her lips trembled. I thought you'd say no. I thought it would be easier if I just did it. Easier for you, I corrected. Not for me. Not for Bella. The silence stretched again, thicker now, filled with the weight of everything that had been said and everything that couldn't be unsaid. I could see it in her face, the regret, the shame, the desperate wish to turn back time and undo it all. But there are some things you can't come back from. Some lines, once crossed, stay burned into the ground forever. Lila wiped at her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, leaving dark, wet streaks behind. Where is she? She asked, her voice a fragile whisper. Where's Miso? I shook my head slowly. With the rescue. She's already been adopted. The words gutted her. I watched it happen. Watched her fold in on herself, as if her body couldn't support the weight of her own grief. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to tell her I was sorry too. That I hadn't wanted it to end this way. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the street below. People hurried by with umbrellas, bundled in coats, living their lives in blissful ignorance of the little tragedies happening in the windows above them. You ruined everything, she said behind me, her voice a raw, broken thing. I turned back, to her, meeting her eyes. No, I said. You did. And maybe that was the truth of it. Maybe the moment she decided to give Bella away without so much as a conversation, she had set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. A slow, inevitable collapse of trust, of love, of everything we had ever built between us as sisters. Heard her get up, her movements slow and stiff like an old woman. She disappeared into her bedroom without another word, the door clicking shut behind her with a sound that felt too final, too permanent. I stayed where I was, staring at that closed door, feeling the full weight of what we had done to each other settle into my bones. Neither of us would come out of this the same. Neither of us would ever look at the other without remembering. The days that followed were quiet in the worst way. Not peaceful, not still, just hollow. The kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and makes your own heartbeat feel too loud. Lila and I moved around each other like ghosts in that apartment, avoiding eye contact, speaking only when absolutely necessary, and when we did, it was clipped, brittle, like dry leaves snapping underfoot. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bella's face, her tail wagging, her eyes wide, and trusting, waiting for me to come home like I always did. But she wasn't home anymore. She never would be. And that truth carved into me deeper than any knife. I kept checking the rescue site where Miso had been listed, hoping for some clue of where she'd ended up. Who had her now, if she was loved, the way she deserved? She wasn't listed anymore, adopted quickly, as I knew she would be. I should have felt good about that. Instead, I just felt empty. Lila barely left her room. She stopped posting on social media, stopped going out with her friends. Once, I passed her bedroom and heard her crying softly. I paused, hand hovering over the doorknob, and then moved on. There was nothing left to say. One night, about 2 weeks later, I came home to find her sitting in the kitchen, a single mug of tea in front of her, untouched and going cold. She looked smaller somehow, like something inside her had withered. "You." "When," she said, her voice thin and flat. I didn't respond. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, unsure if this was some kind of game or truce. "I keep thinking about how I just took her," she went on, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from the mug. "Like she was nothing. Like your love for her didn't matter. I didn't even think about how it would feel for you to come home and realize she was gone." I let the silence sit between us a moment before I spoke. It felt like someone reached into my chest and ripped something out with their bare hands. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with tears. "I was wrong. So wrong. And what you did hurt, but at least you made sure Miso would be okay. You didn't just dump her on a stranger's doorstep like I did with Bella." I looked down, at the counter. "I didn't do it to be kind." "But you were," she said, a crack of something fragile in her voice. "Even when you hated me, you still made sure she'd be safe." I didn't want her forgiveness. I didn't want her guilt. What I wanted was something neither of us could have anymore. I wanted time to rewind. I wanted Bella back. I wanted to trust my sister again. I wanted to walk through the door and hear paws skittering across the floor. I wanted the warmth that used to live in this place. Instead, we sat there in the cold kitchen, two broken people who had broken each other, trying to build something out of the wreckage. "I'm going to move out," Lila said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not fair to stay here, not after what happened. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow." I said nothing, but something in my chest loosened just slightly. Not in relief, not in triumph, just in the quiet. Acknowledgement that space might be the only thing that could stop us from doing more damage. A week later, she was gone. Her room was empty, scrubbed clean of any trace she'd ever lived there. The apartment was too quiet, but in a different way now, less suffocating, more like the aftermath of a storm. Broken branches, scattered debris, but also air that tasted sharp and clean. I still missed Bella every day. Some mornings I'd wake up and expect to feel her pressed against my legs, only to find the bed cold and undisturbed. I kept her collar, the little silver tag still engraved with her name, on my nightstand. I didn't know where she was. I didn't know who had her. But I hoped that she was happy, that she was safe, that she hadn't spent too long wondering why I hadn't come for her. And as for Miso, I never checked again. I told myself it was because it wouldn't change anything, but the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid that knowing where she was would make me feel something I couldn't afford to feel anymore. I didn't hate Lila, not truly, but I didn't trust her. And some things, no matter how much you want to forgive, can't be unbroken. In time, the pain dulled. I smiled again, laughed again, but every now and then I'd walk by the front door and out of pure muscle memory, I'd still glance down, hoping to see that familiar face, that wagging tail. And every time, I didn't. But I kept looking anyway.